evening, everyone. So I hope you all are having a great day. So this is me, Vikas Srivastav again. So I'm the founder and CTO at AlmaBetter. And can you guys please confirm if I'm audible enough and my voice is not breaking? So if you can just give a reaction. All right. Okay. So I'll start with the lecture. So yesterday we started our journey of learning data science, and the first hurdle that we'll cross is by starting with the fundamentals of Python. Because whatever work which we want to do, be it related to data science or machine learning, so we can do all those things in Python because Python will be our playground to carry out whatever ideas we have, whatever ideas which we want to give shape to, and find some meaningful results. So everything can be done in Python. And yesterday, because I went through the advantages of Python, why Python is the go-to language, especially in the field of data science. Of course, Python is also used extensively for other sort of purposes. But for now, we want to acquaint ourselves with specific Python concepts which will be relevant for data science. So yesterday we got got acquainted to an idea of what are different data types in Python, right? And we specifically talked about numeric and Boolean data types, right? So in numeric data type, you learned about integers and you learned about floats, right? And then you also learned about Boolean variables. And we also went through the concept of how you can name a variable, what are the rules for naming a variable in Python, right? So those things which you have learned at this moment. So today we'll again be discussing another data type in Python, which we'll encounter more often than not, right? Because the world is not so simple. Everything that will get as a raw data will not be a number only, right? So they can be text, and we need some way to figure out how we can handle textual data, right? So to on that front only, so we'll learn about an important concept in Python, that is strings. So strings are used in Python to record text information such as names. Of course, they can be anything, which let's say it can be a document, right? So we'll start from us. We can in a string we can have a single letter, then we can have a word, then we can have a phrase, right? Then we can have a sentence, and then we can have some paragraph, then we can have a document, then we can have a book, right? We could have, and then we can have all the possible set of books available to us, right? So we can encode all sort of textual information using the concept of strings, right? So as I told you, so it could either be a word, a phrase, or entire encyclopedia for that matter, right? So so one thing which you need to understand, that strings in Python are actually a sequence, right? So let's say if I say out a particular name, right? For example, Prashant, right? So P is the first letter, then R is the second letter, right? A is the third letter, then so on and so forth, right? So every letter comes in a sequence and it carries a meaning, right? So if you jumble up the words, so let's say if you spell Prashant, or you write Prashant as RP and ASHANT, right? So it doesn't make sense, right? So the concept of sequence is really important and it's very integral to understanding strings in Python, right? So Python keeps track of every element in the string as a sequence, right? So for example, as I was giving example of Prashant, so similarly we can have the string Joker, in which the letters are arranged in a specific sequence, right? So J comes at the first place, right? Then the character or the letter O comes second, then K third, E fourth, and R is at the fifth place, right? So there is a very integral notion of the sequence, right? And this will be really important in understanding Python, and especially when we talk about indexing and slicing methods. So these things will come in really important, right? So you need to keep in mind that in Python will recognize strings as some sequence of letters, right? And once we know the sequence, we can do anything that we want with those strings, right? So what this means that we'll be able to use indexing to grab particular letters. Like for example, let's say I want to grab the first letter or maybe the last letter of that string, right? It can also be the first three letters, right? Or maybe let's say you have a sentence which consists of 50 words and I want to just have the first 20 words, right? So a different set of tasks can be done using this concept of indexing, right? So the idea of a sequence is really important in Python, and in fact we'll be covering this important concept tomorrow when we talk about lists, right? So lists are also a sequence of elements, right? So strings in a similar way, so they are considered to be a sequence of characters, right? So this is a very important notion, and you should imbibe this in your heart, right, and mind. So a string is essentially a sequence of letters, and in Python we can use the idea of this notion of sequence to do whatever task we want to do on that particular string, right? So of course we'll be learning about how we can do all those set of tasks, but that is of course for later. Firstly, what we'll try to understand that how can we create a string, right? So how can we create a string? So to create a string in Python, you need to use either single quotes or double quotes. Okay, so for example, so this is a variable which I'm defining, right? So this variable name is totally valid, right? So it starts with a character, right? And all the remainder, so it starts with a character which is a letter or an underscore, right? So in this case, of course, it's a letter, and then all the remainder or the remaining characters, they are either letters, underscore, or number, right? So this satisfies the criteria of a valid variable name. So this is the variable name I am going with. So this is what we call as my first string, right? So this is a variable. You can write any other valid variable name depending upon your discretion, right? Now we write equal to. So remember, whenever we write equal to after a variable name, that means we want to assign a value to that particular variable, right? So in this case, what I'm doing, so earlier, remember yesterday, we were writing something like x is equal to 4, right? So we're providing the values as numbers, right? Because yesterday we were dealing with numeric data types, and today we want to store not the numbers but the words or strings, right? So I'll re-emphasize, so string can be a single letter, it can be a word, it can be a sentence or a bunch of sentences, a book, or an encyclopedia, right? So everything can be your string, right? uh, of course, to include an entire encyclopedia will need a lot more space here, but of course that's manageable, right? So here, how do you create a string? So you specify your text, what you want to store, and then you provide that within single quotes, or also you can use double quotes. So here I have chosen single quotes, and I'm just writing the name of the string. So as I was telling you that we should follow the best practices. So I'll do, I'll use the print statement, right? If I want to print anything, so I'll just go ahead and execute this, right? So here when you do print, right, use the print statement or the print function, and within the parenthesis you provide the name of the variable which you want to print, right? So this variable in our case, it contains the value algebra, right? What about, let's say, if I just do not use the print, but I just write my variable name, right? And let's see what it gives, right? So it gives me algebra, but with a bit of difference, that here we have a single quotes, but in this case, when we are using the print statement, right, we are not getting any quotes, right? So this is really important, and you need to keep in mind. And going forward, we'll always stick ourselves with the best practices possible, and that's why we'll be using the print statement wherever we want to print any string. Okay, so I'll just remove this cell. So how do you remove this cell? So you just click on this, and then you'll get an option to delete, right? So you can also use a shortcut. So maybe I'll not use the delete button, so I can use the shortcut, so control MT, right? So it just yeah, makes my cell disappear, right? Okay, so this is how you create a string. Now let's say here we just had a word. Now our we want to do something more, right? So we don't only want to uh, store a single word, but we want to store a sentence, right? So here, what I'm saying, so I have a variable which I'm calling as phrase, right? So this is a valid variable name, and I've tried to follow the most appropriate nomenclature, right? So here everything is small case, right? So you should follow that, but of course you can have uppercase variable name, but the good practice is you always need to write your variable names using lowercase characters, right? So here I'm storing another sentence. So statistics sits at the heart of machine learning, right? So you have some spaces here which are valid text characters, right? So it can be space, it can be comma, it can be question mark, exclamation, and we can have full stop here, right? So let's go ahead and print this phrase. Okay, so now as you can see, it's just printing statistics sits at the heart of machine learning, right? So now I told you that we can create a string in Python using either single quotes or double quotes, but we have been sticking with single quotes. So let's see another example where we can define our string variable using double quotes, right? So whatever text you have, you need to provide them in single quotes or in double quotes. There are some specific cases in which we need to consider, and I'll be telling you those in just a while. But for now, let's see how can we create a string using double quotes, right? So again, I write a variable name of my choice, which is a perfect valid variable name, right? And then in double quotes, I write, so this is my string, which I want to store in the variable my string, right? So I write string built with double quotes, right? So this is my string, and I'm providing this within double quotes, right? So which is self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and yeah, run this. So yeah, so it prints string built with double quotes, right? And as you can remember from the last class, right? So these are your comments. So whenever we want to add comment to a cell, quote cell, right? So we can use the hash symbol and then write whatever we want to, right? So that you can do. For example, here this is also a print. This is also a comment, right? So we need to yeah keep this in mind that Python, whenever we run this particular cell, so you remember how we run a particular cell. So we just press shift plus enter, and then yeah it will execute whatever the code is there. Python does not execute whatever you have written in comment, right? So Python does not interpret it anything, right? So it leaves them as they are, right? Okay. So now moving forward, uh, so now let's say you have a sentence, but in that sentence itself, you have a single quotes, right? So let's try to write this sentence. So this is my sentence. So of course, this is quite intuitive. My sentence is, I am using single quotes, but this will create an error. So this is a string or the text which I want to store in a variable which I'm calling as sentence, right? So sentence is my variable, and then I want to store this sentence in my variable sentence, right? So what is the text that we want to store in this variable? So I am using single quotes, but this will create an error, right? And I'm specifying this within single quotes, right? So as you can see, and let's go ahead and try to run this and see if we are able to do this or not, right? So it's saying invalid syntax. So why is it happening? So the reason for the error is that because the single quote in I apostrophe M, so this stopped the string, right? So what else we can do? So instead, so to handle these cases, we can provide them in double quotes, right? So I have the same sentence here, exactly the same, right? It has apostrophe here, right? But if we specify this within double quotes, then we can go ahead and print this, and let's see if it runs, right? So it runs perfectly now, right? So whenever, let's say you have any quotes or anything as such, and you want to print those, so you can use double quotes in this case, right? So this will help you do your task easily, right? Now, so you can play around with quotes. There are a lot of different ways in which you can handle, but I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of intricacies. So for now, let's stick to the basics. So how do we create a string? So we can use single quotes or double quotes, right? So if your text does not contain any single quote or double quote within it, right? So we can just simply go ahead with single quotes, and that should do our job. But in case where the text which we want to store in a variable that has single quotes or double quotes, so we'll need to store that within the double quotes here, right? So like this. Okay, so there are various edge cases, which of course I'll be discussing later on. But for now, you don't have to bother about, let's say, if I want to print a complicated sentence in which I have two quotes, two single quotes, two double quotes. What about these cases? So of course, we'll be covering those. But for now, we just want to learn that how do we create a string. Okay. Now I can provide another character which is a valid text character. So for example, within double quotes I've written hashtag here, right? And I'm storing this in a variable which I'm calling as hashtag, right? So quite intuitive, right? So I can print this and this will print hash, right? I can also print store space here, right? So in fact, so a space b, right? So we can you print this, and as you can see is a space b, right? Of course, let's stick to the variable which we have, right? So this was hashtag, right? Now let's talk about how do we print strings. Now we know, of course, we have been printing strings at this moment, but there are some things which you should be familiar with. So in Jupyter Notebook, so if you just have a string in a cell, right? So if you have something like this, so I'm calling, I am writing the string deep learning, and then I've provided, I've specified that within single quotes, right? So I can just go ahead and run this, right? And this will just print deep learning. Okay, of course, there is single quotes. If you want to, let's say, use the print statement, you can use this. Okay, what do you think this will give? Right, so this is printing deep learning but without the quotes. Okay, so let's not use the print because I want to demonstrate a thing here, right? So let's just print this as it is. Okay, so maybe we can store this in, let's say, ml concept. Okay, so this is my variable, and I will just, what I'll do is print this variable. Okay, so what this will print, so this will print deep learning, right? Now, let's say I have created two strings, and as you know, every line is a single statement in Python, right? So here I have a line where I have written this linear algebra, and there's another line in which I have written calculus, right? And these are your valid text or strings, right? So let's go ahead and see what it prints. So, but here what happens that it just prints the calculus, that is the string which it is finding at the end, right? It's not printing linear algebra, right? So how do we get around this? So a simple use case, a simple way would be to use the print statement, right? So in print statement, you write linear algebra, you write calculus, and then we can, let's ignore these things. So how do you comment a particular statements? So you can press control and then forward slash, right? And then you can just press it again to uncomment, right? So if I press control forward slash, yeah, so it will get uncommented, right? So for now I don't want to execute these cells, so what I'll do, I'll select all these cells. Okay, I'll select all these cells, and then I'll hit control forward slash. Okay, so it will comment it, as in Python will not do anything what is asked here, right? So it just treats treats it as a comment. Okay, so let's go ahead and print this. So here we can see that both linear algebra and calculus are getting printed, right? So here we're not able to do. So print statement here can come in really handy. So if you want to print a bunch of variables which are there in your code, so that you can do in this particular way. Okay. So so I hope you guys are clear at this point. So how do we create a string and how we can print a string? So can you please say yes privately to me in the chat? So just I know that you guys are following along, right? So please mention, just yeah, directly message it to me, right? Okay, right. So this is a fairly straightforward concept. Right. So Prashant, yes, you're right about that. So you can try that yourself. So you can experiment with bunch of different scenarios and see what gets printed and what not. Okay. All right. So I'll move along then. Okay. Okay. So now we want to do much more than this, right? So we just don't we of course we want to create strings, we want to print the strings, but there are so much more things that we can do with strings. Okay, so I want to give you a little context. Okay, so text forms a very important component of major data type, right? So a lot of things. So for example, let's say if you talk about Twitter data, or if you talk about LinkedIn data, right? So most of them are text, right? Or even whatever the chats you are having over various social media platforms, right? So all those are in text. Of course, there are additions, so you can send images or any audio file or video file, right? So you can of course do those, but text constitutes a very important source of or type of data, right? And when we talk about data science as a field, right, so there are we'll find various data which will have text, right? So it could be something like customer complaints, right? So you could have a variable, right? So just imagine an Excel sheet where you're logging the customer records or customer contact records, right? So whatever the complaint you got to know from the customer, you can log those as proper text, right? So you can transcribe whatever the guy said, and you can log that information in your Excel sheet. So you can have info. So you can have customer complaints. Then you can have, let's say if we're talking about uh, Flipkart as a website, so they need to have product description, right? So product description will also be constituted of words, right? So words or text form an integral part of the data, which we'll see later on. Okay, and in data science, there is a special field which we call as natural language processing, and we'll be using a lot of techniques to process our text, right? So those things are there, but of course there will be general scenarios in which we just want to explore some data set, and some columns will be your text, and we want to do some operations, right? So we want to have a lot of functionalities. So we just don't want to restrict ourselves to just creating a bunch of strings or printing them, but we want to do a lot of operations, right? So maybe let's say you are maintaining a register of enrolled students in a particular cohort, right? And some students have written their name in small caps, a small case, and you want to have a very consistent set of records. So what you need to do some transformation. So what is the sort of transformation you can think of? So we can have, let's say we want to convert all lowercase characters to uppercase, right? So this is an operation, and we want to have a lot of flexibility and freedom in how to approach and do these basic tasks, right? Apart from this, let's say you want to get rid of some characters, or you want to do any such operation, so we can do a lot of things, and Python makes it really easy, right? So there are a bunch of string properties which I'll be walking you through now, and there are other important methods and functions associated with strings which we can use to uh, get these transformations which I am talking about, right? So I just cite an example that you might need. There would be a case where you need to, let's say there are 10,000 names, and you want to change all those names from lowercase to uppercase in just one go within a second, right? So we can do those using Python, right? So we want to have a lot of flexibility in terms of how we want to transform our text, and the string functions and methods which I will be discussing, so they will be the engine for all such transformations that we can conceive and that we can try to do. Okay, so the first important thing when we talk about how we can play around with strings is is an important function which is len, right? So len, so what this function gives you, so this gives you the length of the string, right? So I told you that a string is essentially a sequence of characters, right? So there are only as many characters in a string, and we can count those characters, right? So the total number of characters in a string will be the length of the string, right? So you can say that, yeah, this word is 5 letter or 5 character long, or this word seems like 10 character long, or this sentence seems like 45 character long, right? So that's the definition of length of a string. Okay, so here I have created a variable which I'm calling as algo, and then in this variable I'm storing the text which is regression, right? So don't worry about this if you have not heard these terminologies, but just keep in mind that this is a term which we'll be using. Okay, so I've stored this particular text or data in my variable algo, and I'm of course specifying it within single quotes. That's how you define a basic string, right? So now what I can do, that similar to a print function, right? So you wrote print earlier, so you wrote print, and then within the parenthesis you provided the variable name or the string which you wanted to print, right? So here also, if I want to find the length of a string, so I can call the length function, which how you can do that. So you simply need to write len, and then within parenthesis, right? So within parenthesis, you need to provide the name of the variable whose length you want to find out, right? So, okay, so one question, can you guys tell me, would can we use length for, let's say, a numeric variable? Would it make sense? Yeah, does it make sense if you want to use length for, let's say, a numeric variable, right? Okay, that's great. Okay, so of course, because string is a sequence of character, it has only so many characters possible. So we can of course find the number of characters, and that will be the length of our string. So I write the name of the variable within parentheses, and I just run this. Okay, so it will give me the length 10, and we can count it, right? So two characters here, then gr is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So there are 10 characters in this. Let's see if I want to add a space here. Okay, so what do you think the length will be again? So the length will be 11, right? Because I've added a space, and a space is considered as a proper character, right? So this is uh, the function len, right? So len function helps you get the length of a string. Okay, so this is a built-in function in Python. So it counts all the characters in the string. So all the characters include spaces and punctuation. So all the punctuations you can think of, and the spaces. So all those will be counted as characters in the string. Okay, so I can have, let's say, hashtag here, right? So this will be 12 characters, right? So the length of the string is 12 in this case. Okay. Okay. So now let's move on. So this is a very important concept, and I think you will be using this throughout the entire program, in fact, right? So the concept of indexing, right? So indexing is a really important concept in Python. So of course we'll learn about the concept of indexing with respect to string, right? But tomorrow also we'll be learning about indexing in lists, and then will when we work with data frames or arrays, right? So the concept of indexing will be really important, because most of the time we don't want to work with the entire data, but we want to work with a subset of data, right? So that's where the concept of indexing and slicing will become really important to help us do those tasks. Okay, so let's acquaint ourselves with the notion of indexing. So as you know that strings are a sequence in Python, right? What that implies, that means Python can use indexes to call parts of the sequence, right? So it can index every position or the location of those characters in sequence, and we can use those indexes to, let's say, do any such sort of task. Okay, so a string index refers to the location of an element present in a string, right? So the string index or the index refers to the location of an element present in a string. Okay, because uh, a string is nothing but a sequence of character. So we can qualitatively say that, yeah, this is the first element, this is the second element, this is the third element, and this is the last element, right? So we can qualitatively say those things, right? But in Python, how what's the concept of indexing, and with which value does it start, right? So the indexing begins from zero in Python, right? So This is the thing which I have been repeating over and over again, right? So this is uh, um, one of the most important concepts if we want to understand, right? So indexing in Python begins with 0, right? So whenever you have this concept of sequence, right? So there will have this notion of indexing, right? So whenever we have this concept of sequence, that some characters or some elements are arranged in a proper sequence, right? So uh, that will imply that we need the concept of index, because an index can be used to refer to the location of an element present in a string, or maybe in a list, or wherever we have a bunch of elements, right? Where the sequence is important, so there will have the concept of index, right? So the indexing begins from 0 in Python. Okay, so I'll go through some examples, but for now let's look at the properties. Okay, so the first element is assigned an index 0, right? The second element is assigned an index of 1, and so on and so forth, right? So the first element is indexed as 0, the second element is indexed as 1, the third element is indexed as 2, right? And so on and so forth, right? And there's one important thing which you need to keep in mind, that we use square brackets after an object to call its index. Okay, so we can specify the index within the square bracket, and that can help us retrieve the element sitting at that particular index, right? So as of by now you must be already know that index corresponds to the location of an element. Okay, so it corresponds to the location of an element uh, in a string, right? So of course the notion of index is transcendental across different objects in Python. So we will have a concept of index in string, we'll have the concept of index in list, we'll have the concept of index in tuples, right? So there are various data structures which we'll be dealing with, which have the concept of indexing. uh, for now we'll restrict ourselves with the concept of indexing with respect to strings. Okay, so let's say I have a string variable and my variable name is string. Okay, and so what is I'm storing in my variable string? So I'm writing something called principal component analysis, and there is of course an exclamation mark here, right? And I'm providing this within single quotes, so Python registers the information that yeah, this is a string, right? So we can go ahead and do this, and then you can also find the type of this. So right, so the type of this variable is str, right? So yesterday we talked about this function type, which can help you get the type of a variable, right? The data type of a variable, or the uh, yeah, the data type of the value which is contained in that variable. Okay, so this is the type function which you are already familiar with, right? Now let's move ahead, and we can print this string, of course, using the print function. So let's run this cell too, right? So just reiterating that if you need to run a cell, you can press shift plus enter. Okay, now let's start indexing. Okay, so you know that indexing begins with 0 in Python, right? So let's say firstly what you need to do, let's say if I want to retrieve an element sitting at the first index, okay, or the first element of my string, so what do I need to do? So I need to, of course, I'm writing print using the print function, but within this what I'm writing, so I've written the name of my variable. Okay, now I'm specifying the square brackets, right? So remember, from here in Python we use brackets after an object to call its index, right? So we use brackets. Okay, now in the bracket our task is to specify the index corresponding to which we want to get the element, right? So each index refers to an element in this string, right? So I'll just tell you. So, for example, you have this string, let's say Joker, right? So you have this string. So you can assume that this string is in a box, right? So this is the first element, this is the second, third, and fourth, right? So this is the first element, but the index is 0, right? The index here is 1, right? The index here is 2. The index here is 3, and then index here is 4, right? This is the first element, but the index is 0. This is the second element, but the index is 1. This is the third element, but the index is 2, right? So indexing begins with 0. So the third element will have the index 3 minus 1, that is 2. The fourth element will have the index 4 minus 1, that is 3, right? So it's just minus 1 because we're starting from 0. We're not counting from 1, rather than we are counting from 0, right? So I hope you get the notion, right? So this is a sequence, right? So the first character is J, the second character is O, the third character is K, the fourth is E, and the fifth is R. And all these elements, they are sitting at different locations. So the first character will have the index 0, the second will have the index 1, this the third will have the index 2, right? So you get the idea, right? So here now I want to find the first element of my string, right? So what is the, can you tell me what is the uh, index that I should specify within the square bracket? So let's say I want to get the first element. Okay, so can you tell me over chat? So I want to get the first element. Yes. So all of you, most of you are correct, right? So I need to provide 0. So whatever we are specifying with this square bracket, that will be the index. Okay. So if I want to get the first element, I'll write 0. If I want to get the second element, I'll write 1. Okay. So let's go ahead and execute this. This will be pretty straightforward. Okay. So let's go ahead and yeah. So the first element is P, right? Now let's say I want to print the second element, which is R, right? So within the square bracket, I'll replace 0 with 1. Okay, and this will give me the second element, right? So remember, the second element corresponds to the first index 1. Okay, so it will give me R here. Okay, all right. Okay, so now I want to get the 16th element, right? So what should I specify in the within the square brackets? I want to get the 16th element, and let's verify this before we execute ourselves. So let's count it, right? In fact, I can, yeah, increase the size of my notebook. Okay, so let's count and find the 16th element which we want to print, and let's verify if that works. Okay, so this is the first element, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? So n should be, so n is my 16th element, and if I want to retrieve the 16th element, so what is the index value we want to specify? So 16 minus 1, that is 15, right? So let's go ahead and print this. So this is n, right? So this is the 15th element. Okay, so in this way we can grab a particular element from a string or a particular character from a string. Okay, just one thing, that here we had space, but that is again also counted as one character, right? So the space is sitting at, so let's say if I so what is the position of this element, right? So this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, 9, 10, right? So if I specify 9 here, okay, so what do you think I should get? Right, so I get nothing, but this is space. Of course, this is white space, so you're not able to distinguish it, but this is, it's printing this particular space, right? So this is a valid character, right, in our string. Now, of course, we can use the, so I can add a comment, so print the length of a string. Okay. So of course, we have seen the length function. So how do we call the length function? So we write len, len, and then within the parenthesis, we provide the name of the variable which we want to print. So this will print the length of my string, and the length here is in this case 29. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay. Great. So now what happens? So let's say this string is only 29 characters long. So what do you think will I get when I write something like 50? So can you guys tell me? So let's say if my index exceeds the length of the string, okay, so what will I get? Will I get any error or any particular output? Right, so let's see. So most of you are saying we'll be getting an error. Okay, right? So this it is showing the error, and what's the error? So error is index error. Okay, and it's saying that it is string index out of range, right? Because there are only as many as 29 characters in our string, and there is no element sitting at the index 50, right? Then that means that there is no 51st element, right? So this will throw an error because the index is out of range. What can you tell me, if I write 29, what will happen? Okay, so can you tell me what will happen if I write 29? So, so share your answers in the Padlet. Okay, so you can share your answer in the Padlet, which I had shown you earlier. Okay, so yeah, sending the link. So use this Padlet, and yeah, just write. Okay, okay, so you can write your answers, and Shashikant, you can ask your question in the forum. So I'm deleting this for now. Okay, okay. So what we'll get? So guys, yeah, please. So a lot of people are saying that we'll get index out of range error. Okay, again index error. Okay, so let's go ahead and verify this if that's indeed the case. So again, index string index out of range, right? So because uh, the highest index for this particular string is 28, right? Because the indexing starts from 0, right? So the 29th element will correspond to the index value 29 minus 1, that is 28. What about if I write 28 here? So what do you think I get? So I'll get exclamation mark, right? So this is my last character of this string, right? Remember, this is our string, and the last character is exclamation mark, right? This is what we have gotten, what we have printed when we are using 28. Okay, now if you want to get the last element, right? So without even knowing the length of the list or anything as such, right? What we can do, right? So here we could have written, so the index will be, let's say, the length of my string, okay, minus 1. So what is length of string? So this is 29 minus 1, right? So this gives me the last element, right? But we can do it in a much better way, right? So we don't have to write all these things. What we can write, instead we can provide the index value minus 1. So index value minus 1 corresponds to the last element. So let's go ahead and print this, and this will print exclamation mark, right? So this is the last element. If I want to print the second last element, so I can write minus 2, right? So minus 1 uh, is the last element. So I can again draw this for you. So let's say if you talk about joker again, right? So we had joker again earlier, right? And let's say they are in separate boxes. Okay, now, yeah, so I told you this is the 0th index, right? This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. Also, this element also refers to this index minus 1. This refers to the index minus 2. This refers to the index minus 3. This refers to the index minus 4. This refers to the index minus 5. Okay. So let's see if this works for us. So I'll just yeah, clear this drawing. Okay. So if I write minus 2, so hopefully this should give me the second last element of my string. Okay, so it is S, right? So the second last element is S, of course, right? So this is second last element, so it's giving S here. What about let's say minus 28? Can you guys tell me what this will give me? A string minus 28, as in we want to get the 20th character from back. Okay, so what this will print? Can you guys tell me? I am giving you an information that the length of the string is 29. So what do you think this will give us? Can you write in Padlet here? Yeah. The first character or the second character will it print? I just want to know from you guys. Right. So I can see. So it will. A lot of people are saying second element. Okay. So let's see if that's indeed the case. right? So this is giving R, right, which is the second last element, right? So if I want to get P, I need to write minus 29 here, right? So this will give me the first character, right? So I hope the concept of index is pretty much clear to you guys, right? So few things to keep in mind, which I had described above, right? So a string index refers to the location of an element present in a string, okay? And the indexing begins from 0 in Python. Okay, so this is a very important concept. So the indexing in Python, it begins from 0, and the first element is assigned an index 0, while the second element is assigned an index of 1. Okay, and then of course if we want to retrieve an element and we want to use indexing method, so we need to use the square brackets, right? So we write the name of the string and then we provide the square brackets, right? So we write the name of the string, we provide the square brackets, and within the square brackets we specify the index corresponding to which we want to find the element, right? So every element corresponds to a distinct index. Okay, so yeah, just give me a minute. All right. Okay, so now we know what indexing is. Okay, so okay, so I hope you guys are now comfortable with the concept of indexing, right? So now let's have a look at the string slicing. Okay, so up till this point, what we were doing, we were just extracting one particular element from a string, right? So we were just extracting one character, right? So like P, then space, or then R, right? So we were using the indexing method. We were just getting the or retrieving a single character. But now using with the slicing technique, what we can do, we can grab whatever we want, right? So let's say if I want to grab the first three elements, right? So let's say if I want to grab the first 10 elements, or the let's say all the elements between the index 11 and 20, right? Or maybe the last 10 elements, right? So we can do all sorts of slicing. So let's see how we can do that. Okay, so we can use a colon to perform slicing, which grabs everything up to a designated point. Okay, so this is a really important concept, and when I give you the example, so you'll be able to relate to it much better. So the starting index is specified on the left of the colon, right? So the starting index is specified on the left of the colon, and the ending index is specified on the right of the colon. Okay, so and one important thing is the element located at the right index is not included in the slicing. So whenever we want to do that, so uh, we will not be able to get the right index, the element at the right index. So what does that mean? So let's take an example here. Okay, so this is my the same string which I have been using earlier, right? So here I am just printing my original string. Okay, now here what I'm printing, so I am writing my string variable name, and then within the square brackets I have a colon which denotes the slicing. Okay, then I have the starting index and the ending index, right? So the starting index is 1, right? So uh, so our slicing will begin from the second element, right? Because second element corresponds to the index value 1, right? Now, on the right hand side of the colon, we have 13. So the index 13 would correspond to the 14th element, and that element will not be included, right, in the slicing, right? So remember this point. So the element located at the right index is not included. Okay. So let's see what will it print. Okay. So let's go ahead and yeah, just run this. So it will start printing. It will only return those characters which are sitting between the index 1 till 12, right? Because the index 13 is not included. So all the elements starting from index 1, 2, 3 till 12, every element will be retrieved. Okay, so the first the element at the first index or index 1, it's R, right? So this is R because this is the second character. Okay, and this corresponds to the index 1. Now index 2, right? Index 3, index 4, index 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So now we have run out of whatever the output, right? So after this we are not getting anything, right? So remember, the element located at the right index is not included in the slicing. Okay, so here let's say we can have uh, so we can have 0. So let's take that example. So for example, 1 second. Okay, so let's say I want to print the first let's say if I want to print the first 12 characters, can you guys please tell me what will be the starting index and the ending index? So yeah, just mention that, right? So mention in the Padlet. Okay, so okay, so a lot of people are saying that 0 to 13, some are saying 0 to 12, right? So I want the first 12 characters. So here my question, so I want the first 12 characters, so what should I write? So a lot of people are saying 0 to 13. Okay, some are saying 0 to 12, right? And okay, so let's see. So if I want to get everything, right? So 12, right? So 12 index corresponds to the 13th element, right? So hopefully this should give me the first 12 characters, right? So we can count it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So this gives me the first 12 characters. We can do a lot more, so we don't even have to specify 0, because the indexing will, the default will be assumed to be 0. So if I write in this way, so it will grab everything till the uh, index 11, right? Because this is not included, 12 is not included, so it will grab all the elements which are the first 12 characters. Okay, so let's go ahead and print this. So it gives me the same output, right? So we don't even need to specify 0. That's just a redundant thing, right? Okay, what about I want to print the last 12 characters? Can anyone tell me? So wait a bit, let me just clear the board, and then you can tell. So last 12 characters I want, right? So just post your answers here. Okay, so the last 12 characters I want. Okay, so some people are saying so minus 12 colon. Okay, we can try this. Okay, so they're saying minus 12 colon, and I'll not specify the ending index. That means I want to grab everything uh, after and including the element at the index minus 12. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this print. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So it gives me the last 12 characters, right? So the first 12 characters, so I can add a code cell from here, and then so the first 12 characters we can get using this method, right? You're using this particular statement, right? And I can get the last 12 characters using this. Okay, all right. So I'll just clear this because you guys have been able to answer. Okay, okay. So now what I want to do, so if you do not specify the ending index, then all elements are extracted which comes after the starting index, including the element at that starting index, right? So the element at the starting index, that is included in the slicing, but the element at the ending index is not included, right? So if you don't specify this ending index, so it will consider all the elements coming after and including this index 10. Okay, so I hope you get that idea. Okay, All right. So moving ahead, okay, so we can play around with a bunch of different things here. Okay, and what if you don't specify even either the starting index or the ending index? Okay, so if you don't specify anything, right, so it will just print the entire string, right? So it's just is the same thing as just writing string, right? So here you're not slicing, so your slice is in fact the whole entire string, right? So there's no subsetting or sub slicing. It's in fact returning the entire string. Okay, so the if you're not specifying the ending and starting and the ending index, so it will yeah, fetch all the elements, right? And as I told you, we can use negative indexing to go backwards. Okay, so I want to go from -4 to -1. Okay, so this will give me, so -4 will be included, -3 will be included, -2 will be included, but -1 will not be included. Okay, because the element at the right index is not included. So if I print this, right, so I'll not get any exclamation, right, because the last element is not included in the slice, right, because of the obvious reason. But if I want to do that, so I'll just remove this and have nothing after the colon. Okay, so I'll just print this, and yeah, it prints me the exclamation mark here. Okay, now there are a few more things which we can do. So we can also use index and slice notation to grab elements of a sequence by a specified step size. So up till this moment, if you specified the starting index and the ending index, all the elements between them will be grabbed, right? But let's say if I want to have a lot more flexibility, I don't only want to have all those elements sitting between these two indexes, that is the starting and the ending index, but I want to, let's say, fetch alternate characters or alternate elements, right? So I want to get the, let's say, the third element, skip the fourth, get the fifth element, skip the sixth, get the seventh element, and so on and so forth, right? So if you want to grab elements in a sequence by a specified step size, so we can do that using the double colon method, right? So let's say here in the print statement, you can write string, and within the square brackets, you write double colon and then provide the value 1. So 1 is the step size. Okay. So let's go ahead and print this. And yeah, so this prints principal component analysis. This is the entire string, because the ending index, the starting index and the ending index have not been specified, but only the step size has been defined, right? So this is the step size, okay, which is specified after both the colons. Okay, now let's say if I want to go in step sizes of 5. Okay, yes, so let's say if I want to print in step sizes of 5. Okay, so they will not specifying the starting index, we're not specifying the ending index, but only we want to go in step sizes of 5, or maybe let's not do 5, let's keep it simple, let's keep it 2. Okay, let's see what it prints. So it prints the first character element, which is p, then it skips over one element r and prints I. Okay, takes I, then skips over n and then it retrieves c, then it skips over I and then retrieves p, right? So we're now moving in step sizes of 2, right? So the 0th index, the second index, the 4th index, the 6th index, so in this fashion. Okay, let's say if I want to move in step sizes of 5, so what this will print? Okay, so this will print this, right? So p, now we want to move in step sizes of 5, right? So it will skip these 4 characters and then it will retrieve I. Now after I, it will skip these 4 characters, that is these, then retrieve c. Okay, now it will skip the next 4 characters and then print then retrieves n. so and so and so forth until it exhausts the list. Okay. Now we want to do something more than that. Okay, so now we want to specify our starting and ending index. So let's say if I want to specify my starting index as 1 and the ending index as 10. Okay, so what do you think this will print? Okay, so can you just explain what why this is printing this, right? So we start from the first index 1, right? That is our second element r, right? Then n, I. So we want to go in step sizes of 2, right? So r, and then it will skip over I, and then fetch n, skip over c, fetch I, skip over p, fetch a, then skip over l, fetch space, right? So as you can see, there is a space here, right? And as you can see, this was already at element. So here, if you print string 10, so what this will give you? So this gives you C, right? Right. So the space was at the index 9, right? So at index 9, the space was there, right? So this is the space, and of course, so here also the ending index is not included in the slice. Okay. So now apart from, so we can also move backwards in a string, right? So using a negative step size. So what is the meaning of that? So let's say I don't specify the starting and the ending index, right? So remember, this is here it will, you'll specify your starting index, here you'll specify your ending index, and here you'll specify the step size. Okay. So as of now, so in this particular example, I'm not taking any starting or ending index. So that means I'm considering the entire string. Okay. But my step size is -1. Okay. So what this means, so for example, let's say if I had my string as Joker. Okay. So now what we'll do, we'll move in this particular direction. Okay. So we'll move in this particular direction using this step size negative, right? So we cannot do something like move from J to R, but instead we'll move in. So one second. Yeah. So when we had positive step size, so we're moving in this direction. But if we have a negative step size, so we'll be moving in this particular direction. Okay. So let's see some examples for this particular case, and then yeah, it will become really clear to you. So let's say if I run this particular cell. So any hint or any idea, you guys, what this will print? So I have double colon and then -1. Okay. So what this will print? Right. So a lot of people say it will reverse this string, because with a negative step size, we'll start from the rear of the string, that is from the back, and then we'll move in that direction. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay. And what this prints me? So this prints me this string, but in opposite direction, right? So the first character is now exclamation, which was the last character, then S, right? So now the string has been reversed. Okay. So I hope you are able to understand this particular concept. Okay. So now, because with a negative step size, we can only move from back. Okay. So let's say if your starting index is 4 and your ending index is 8, what this will print? Right. So this does not print anything. Right. So what about 8 and 4? Right. So my starting index is 8, my ending index is 4, and my step size is -1. That means I need to move in the opposite direction, right, from the back, right? So what this will print? So this will print those characters, right? So why this gave us an empty string? Because it could not find the slice, right? So I'll just give you an example. So maybe let's say if I have a sequence of characters, so maybe let's say these many, right? So this is, let's say, 0th, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6, this is 7, this is 8, right? Now when I'm specifying the starting index as 4 and the ending index is 8. So my slicing is telling that I want to slice from 4th element to the 8th element, or in fact the index till 7, right here till here, right? We want to extract these elements, but because the starting index is smaller than the ending index, but you define the step size as -1. So what that means, you can only move in this direction, that is in this direction. So that's why that gave us an error. Okay, so let's try to run this again. Okay, so this did not give us an error, but it returned nothing, right? So it's an empty slice. Okay, but you specify the proper index values, right? So then we can make this work. Okay, so maybe let's say 10, and then I don't specify, let's say I specify 2. So now it's possible for me to move from the element sitting at the 10th index 10 till the element sitting at the index, which index 3, right? Because 2 will not be included in the slice. Okay, so this is the starting index, this is the ending index, this is the step size. Whenever the step size is positive, your starting index has got to be lower than your ending index, and wherever your step size is negative, you can only start from the elements towards the right, right? That means your starting index has to be greater than the ending index, right? So whenever I say greater than, because of course you can have an alternate value here, which will be something like -20. Okay, so you need to keep this in mind whenever you are providing starting and ending index. That will only be able to give us a meaningful slice when we can traverse in the proper direction, right? So if there is a negative step size, we can only move from the rear, right? So so that's how we are moving from the element at index 10 till element at index 2, where this element at index 2 is not included in the slice. So I hope you guys are able to get the idea. So for example, here s is equal to foo bar, so this is in a string, and I have not specified the starting index, I have not specified the ending index, but my step size is -5. So what this will print, so this will print rf, so we'll start from the back only, right? So R, and then skip over the 4 elements, and then get the 5th element. Okay, so can you guys tell me over chat if the concept of slicing and indexing is familiar to you, right? So okay, so okay, all right, okay, that's perfect. So you people are able to follow the string slicing and indexing, right? So it's pretty straightforward concept. The most important concept that you need to familiarize with yourself, that indexing starts from 0, but we also have negative indexes, which denotes that we can specify elements from the end. Okay, so and then when we want to do the slicing but with some step size, so we can skip over some elements which are between those starting and ending index, and the direction or the sign of the step size matters, as in we can only move in a particular direction, right? So if I'm moving in a direction in which our starting index is greater than the ending index, that means that will work out for us. Okay, so now let's talk about important string properties. Okay, so it's important to note that strings have an important property known as immutability, right? So uh, can anyone tell me, so just wait for a second till I just remove all the posts here. Okay, so can you please specify what immutability, what do you understand by immutability? Okay, so irreplaceable, not able to change, can't be changed, exactly, yeah. So Priyanshu is correct, so it can't be changed. Okay, so it's immutable, so we cannot mutate it, as in we cannot inflict any change, or we cannot bring about any alteration to our string. Okay, so this is the important property what we call as immutability. Okay, so this means that once a string is created, the elements within it cannot be changed or replaced via item assignment. Okay, so we'll see what item assignment is. So let's take an example here. So I have a string variable, and the variable name is string, of course, and I'm storing this value hello, and of course I've provided the single quotes here which will specify that yeah, this is a string variable. Okay, now let's comment this. So how do you comment? So control forward slash, right? So now I can print the first element, right? So I can, or in fact, I can get away with the print statement just to demonstrate a few things. Okay, so the first element is capital H, which is pretty evident from here. Now let's say we want to do something extra. Okay, so is this possible if I want to replace this H with C? Okay, so I want to change my string from hello to cello. Will that be possible? So I am writing something like string 0 or square bracket as in this first element, which is H. So I'm trying to replace this element with capital C. Okay, so do you think this will work? Okay, great. So yeah, let's see. So here it gives you a type error. Okay, so earlier remember we encountered an index error, right? So we provided an index which was greater than the length of the list, and it gave us the error that index was out of range. We are now encountering another error which is type error, right? So it says that str object does not support item assignment. Okay, so what it means that we cannot replace the elements in our string. Okay, so what we can do other things, but we cannot inflict a change that will change my original string. Okay, so so but we can do other tasks. So for example, that we can concatenate two strings, just like you're adding two variables, we can add two words, as in we'll join the two words. Okay, so I have a string one, right? This is my variable in which I'm storing ABC. There's another variable string two in which I'm storing DEF. Now if I simply write string one plus string two, or in fact I can put this in a print statement as well. So I can write within the print statement string one plus string two. So let's see what it prints. So it will print A, B, C, D, E, F. And of course, you remember whenever you're using print statement, it will not show the quotes. Okay. So it's essentially concatenated the string. So it wrote ABC plus DEF. Let's say if I want to add a space between ABC and DEF. So what I can do, I can provide an empty string, or not empty string, but a string with a space. Okay, and I can just add this or sandwich this between the two strings so that I can get a space. Let's see what it prints. So it prints ABC space DEF, right? This is what I exactly wanted. Okay, so we can concatenate strings in this particular fashion. Okay, now let's talk about another function. So what are the what are the functions which we have already encountered in the last two classes, right? So you firstly learned about the print function, you learned about the type function. Now you also learned about the length function, right? So you specify the string within the length function in the parenthesis, and that will give you the number of elements or the length of the string. Okay, there is another function using which what we can do, we can convert an integer into a string, right? So we can use the str function, or you can simply write the number in quotes. Okay, so here I have the same two strings from above. Now I have a numeric variable which is num, and I'm assigning this to a value 4. Okay, so this is what I'm writing, and now in the print statement I am writing string 1 plus. Now instead of just writing num, I am writing str, and in the parenthesis I am writing 4. I am writing num. Okay, and then I'm adding the second string. So let's see what this gives me. Right, so it gives me ABC4DF. We can also do one thing. So we can, in the parenthesis or in the quotes, sorry, in the quotes I can write the number 4, and I can print this. So this will also give me the same thing. Okay, So you can use the str function. So here you can see if I run this, so str of num is nothing but 4 within single quotes here, right? That makes sense. Okay, so I've already just shown you this example. Now okay, so but what we can do, let's say if I wanted to add something to a particular string, so we'll have to reassign that resultant to a new string variable, right? So here let's say I have a string. Okay, so let's just print this. So this is hello. Okay, so now what I'm doing, so in string one, so this is a new variable which I'm creating, and this variable name is perfect, right? So everything is according to the rules which we have discussed for variable nomenclature. And then in after equal to, that means we are assigning something to this variable string one. And what are we assigning? So string plus, and then something like concatenate me. So this is another string, of course, and this is another string, right? So which is hello, and then we can just print this. Okay, so it will print hello concatenate me, right? So now yeah, so we can store this particular change into another string and we can print those. Okay, okay, so what about if I write string here, right? So it will also do the same thing, but what about okay, so if I write string and override it, right? So earlier I wrote another variable, but of course if you want to inflict the change in the same string, so you can do this in this particular way. Okay, so I'll just keep this to string one. Okay, so essentially we're just concatenating strings, nothing new in this particular scenario. Now let's uh, take an example where we want to multiply strings. So what is the meaning of multiply? So let's say I have a string in a variable called letters, and what is the string? So waba. So waba is the link, is a string, and let's say if I write letters star one, right? So what this will give me? So it will just return me letters. Now if what I can do, if I just multiply this by 2, it will repeat the same thing over, right? So waba waba. Okay, so I can do it 10 times too, right? So I have the luxury. So right, so waba will be written 10 times together, right? So waba waba waba, right? So 10 times, right? So in this way we can multiply strings in this fashion, right? So we just have to write star, and then whatever the number we are providing, that string will be repeated that many times. So I hope this is clear to you guys. Okay, so okay, so now so these are the basic things, basic properties which we looked at for a string variables. Now let's look at different functions and methods which we can use for strings, right? So of course I know that you are not aware about the terminology functions and methods, but bear with me. I'll try to uh, release a little bit of suspense now, but of course when we discuss functions and methods in detail in the next week, things will become pretty much clear. Okay, but of course you'll be able to learn about these things. So suppose I have a variable which I'm calling as algorithm, and in this variable I'm storing neural networks. Okay, so this is my string which I'm storing this in a variable called algorithm. So I can print this algorithm, and yeah, so it was yeah, output neural networks, right? Perfect. Now, so there is one function which you already know, so len, right? So you just need to write the name of this function, which is len, and then within the parenthesis you provide the name of the variable whose length you want to get. Okay, so let's do this, and this will print the length of the string, right? So you can confirm that this is 15 characters long. Okay, now so this is a function. Okay, so within the parenthesis I provided the variable, right? So this is an example of a function. So len is a function in Python. Now let's talk about another so it looks similar to a function, but it's not a function, it's a method. Okay, so the exact difference between function and methods will become clear later on, but for now just keep this in mind. uh, that there are methods which can act on a certain object. So in our case, this is the object is string, right? So we can use certain methods. So methods are essentially functions, but uh, those functions are built or designed for specific objects in Python, right? So you have a general terminology which is function, so it can help us do some sort of task. Then there is a concept of method. So methods are also functions, but they're specific to certain objects. So those functions can also be can only be applied on certain objects. Okay. So for example, I have this lower, right? So you might already guess that lower method converts the string to lowercase. Okay. So how do you call this method? So here, instead of writing, lower algorithm, right? So this will not work, right? So name lower is not defined. So how do we do this? So we write the name of the string or the variable in which we have stored our string, right? So we write the name of the algorithm, and then I write dot. Okay, so this is important. I write dot, and then I write the name of the method. Okay, so okay, so this will convert all the characters to lower cases. Okay, okay. So how do we implement a method? So we call the name, we write the name of the variable, and then if I want to convert all the characters in my string variable to lowercase, so I can call this lower method, and I can run. So I can just run this in this way, and this will give me this particular output. Can you now let's check the our original string algorithm. Okay, so this is not affected, right? Even though here we are seeing that all the elements have been uh, converted to lowercase, but here if you print the algorithm, this is the original algorithm variable which we had, right? So n was in caps here, this n was also in caps, right? So this means that, let's say if I apply any method on a string, is on a string object, this will not change my string, right? So I told you this very important property of a string, that strings are immutable. So you cannot change the string. So here, even though this gives you all the characters in lowercase, but if you print the original algorithm or the original string, right, so it is not getting changed. Okay, so bear this in mind. So of course I have shown you this, right? So in function, whenever let's say using length, right, so we specify the name of our variable or the variable within the parenthesis. So this was in the case of a function, but when we talk about a method, so Python identifies that, yes, algorithm is a string variable, and if so, let's do some quick check here. So in Colab, when you write a variable name and you write dot, so it will show you a specific set of methods which only act on a string object, right? So there are various objects which will encounter, right, as we move along. So you'll encounter list, you learn about sets, you'll learn about tuples, dictionaries. So these are various objects in Python. Okay, so everything is an object essentially. So every object has an associated method, right? So you cannot convert a number to lowercase because it does not make sense for a number, right? But for a string, it definitely makes sense, right? For a text, it definitely makes sense to have a method which will convert your elements or characters to lower cases. Okay, so as you can see, you have a bunch of different methods. If you just do what? So you write the name of a variable and write dot, and then you can see a different sorts of functions, or sorry, methods. So here what we use the lower, right? So here now we can specify the parenthesis, and then this will give me everything in small case, right? So as I have already been telling you, that len is a function and lower is a method for a string object, right? So always remember, a method is nothing but a function for a specific object. Okay, so a function is a generic piece of code which can which can do any sort of task for you, but a method is a function defined or designed for a specific object, right? So in this case, lower is a method designed for string object, right? So it makes sense. Okay, so but you don't have to confuse yourself with a lot many things, because you are just you've just started. But you just keep this in mind that uh, there are differences between functions and methods, and these will become clear later on. Okay, so now we have another method which is upper. Okay, so I can simply call this method. So how do I call this method? So of course, as you know, this upper method converts the string to uppercase. Okay, so I write the name of my variable. Of course, let me just print my algorithm so that you can see what's happening. Okay, so I am printing the algorithm first, and then uh, I write the name of the variable, which is algorithm, and then I write dot. Okay, and then I write the upper, right? So there is an upper method which will convert all the elements or characters in our string variable to upper cases. Okay, right? So as you can see, every element has been converted to uppercase, right? So this is the upper method. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. Okay, now moving ahead, this count method. So count method returns the count of a string in a given string. Okay, so this is a very interesting concept. So earlier you learned about lower and upper method, right? So in lower and upper method, you didn't specify anything within the brackets, as in a function takes an argument or an input, right? So but these two methods, they didn't take any input, right? Because the task was pretty straightforward. We didn't need to specify anything. So what we wanted to convert all the characters to either upper cases or lower cases, right? So we don't need any extra information. But imagine a case where we have a method such as count. Okay, so this method returns the count of a string in the given string, right? So do you think it will? Do you think we need to specify the string which we want to look for and get the count, right? So count method. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so I have algorithm here, which is the original neural networks, and I want to count the number of two capital N's here. Let's say. Okay, so how will I call this method? So I write again the name of my string variable, then I write dot, right? And then I write the name of the, so even if you don't know if there is any method, so you can just put dot, and Python will suggest you, yeah, these are the methods associated with it. So you don't have to confuse yourself with these many methods. But let's find our specific method, which is count, right? So this is count, but in the parenthesis, as you can see, it says that return the number of non-overlapping sequences or occurrences of substring sub, right, in string s. Okay, so let's say if I want to count how many n's are there in my string, right? So of course, because there is such a method which we call as count, and this count method returns the count of a string in the given string, right? So this is the string whose count I want to get in my original string. So I need to specify the argument, and the argument will be nothing but the string which we want to look for, right? So if you just run this, so it returns you 2, right? Because there are 2 capital N. What about small n? Do you think this will give me anything, right? So this gives me 0, as there are no small n. Okay, what about EU? Okay, so not only we can search for single character, but we can search for any string, right? So string is nothing but a bunch of characters, right? So here let's say you want to search for EU. Okay, so EU is only occurring once here, right? So that's why the count is 1. Now if I want to count how many spaces are there in my string, so I can use this count method, but my input or the argument string will be space only, right? So this will count the number of spaces in my original string variable, which is algorithm, right? So I write the name of my variable, then I write dot, and then I write count, and then within the parenthesis, I specify the space within quotes, right? So space is nothing but a character too, right? So let's see how many spaces are there in my string, which is neural networks. So only one space. As you can see, there is only one space. Okay. So now let's say if I want to count how many times neural is appearing in our string, which is algorithm. So let's do this, right? So this will return 1. Okay. Now if you write, if I don't write neural but I write something like neurala, right? So this is of course not a part of the string, right? So it will return 0. Okay, so there's nothing such as neurala. Okay, there is of course nur, right? So this is there, so this is occurring once. And what about ne? Can anyone tell me what this will give me? So wait a second. So let me just clear the board for you guys, and then you can post your answers. Okay, so just post your answers here, right? So what will that give us? So algorithm dot count ne, right? So you remember what is your string? Neural networks, right? So let's see. So some are saying 1, some are saying 2, some are saying even 0. Okay. So we have a variety of answers here. Okay. So yeah. So let's see what this gives us. So this gives us 2, right? So this makes sense. Why? Because ne is here once and then ne is again here, right? So ne is occurring twice. So there are 2 instances or occurrences of ne. That's why the count method will yield the value 2. Okay. Okay. So perfect. Now, similar to the count method, we have the find method, right? So whenever you have any method, let's say, which is named find, so what do you want to find, right? So this method returns the index of the first occurrence of a string present in a given string. So similar to the count method, the find method will take string as an argument. Okay. So I'll just print my original algorithm, the variable which contains the value neural networks. Okay. Now I can just call the method using this particular procedure which we have been following. So you write the name of your variable, then you write the method name followed by dot. Okay. And then in the parenthesis, so what is your argument you are specifying? So the string whose first you want to return the index of the first occurrence, right? So let's print this, right? So e is occurring twice, but it's only returning 1 because e is the second element. That means it's corresponding to the index 1. Okay. So find method returns the index of the first occurrence of a string present in a given string. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. Let's say I want to find neural, right? So neural is of course a part of a string. Okay. So what is the index of the first occurrence? So it's 0 because neural is starting from the 0th index. Okay. So hope this makes sense. What about box, right? So box is not part of our string variable algorithm, right? So so it will return -1, right? So it will return -1. So don't confuse this with the last index. Okay. So -1 means that this particular word or string is not present in the given string. Okay. So this is the point. So an important point to note here is that if the string which you're looking for is not contained in the original string, then the find method will return a value of -1. Okay. So if the string which you're looking for, it's not contained in the original string, it will return a value of -1. So Smriti is asking, what's the difference between index and find method? So index essentially corresponds to the location of an element in a string, right? So in this, that is what index is. But the find method, it returns you the index of the first occurrence of, right? So let's say you have two n's here, right? You have two n's, n, and here also n, right? So let's see, right? So the first element is of course n, right? Then you have another, right? So okay, sorry, right? Square brackets, and then maybe I can count it. So 1, 2. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's 7. So this is again n, right? So now if I want to find the capital N, so what do you think this will return? So this will return 0, right? Because it only finds or returns the index of the first occurrence, right? Even though n is occurring twice, so ideally you would have countered or argued that yeah, this should have also returned 7 because n is at these two different locations or indexes. But the find method will only return the index of the first occurrence of a string present in a given string. Okay, and if a string is not present, it will return -1. Okay, so we are almost towards the end of the session, so let's discuss one more method, so that is replace. So replace method takes two arguments, right? So try to think of this in a logical way. So don't worry about Python or anything as such. So let's say if we have a replace method, right? So even in Excel, you must have replaced a particular value, right? So any method or any functionality which is, let's say, named as replace, what we expect it to do, right? So it will look for a particular element or a particular string, and it will replace it with another string, right? That's the meaning of replace, right? So you're looking for a particular string. Once you have found that string, you'll replace it with another string. So replace method will take two arguments. This is very logical, and if you're not able to comprehend, think about this for a minute, right? So you can identify how many arguments a particular method or a function can take just by the name of that function, right? So in this case, there is a method, we know that, yeah, there is a method called replace which is associated with the string object. So what will this do, and how many arguments will it have, right? So because you're saying that the job of this method is to replace something in our string, so it will take some input, that is the string to replace, and the second input will be the string to replace with, right? That is how you will be able to replace or find the replacement, right? And this will return a modified string after the operation. So now let's run this. So I'm trying to replace my white space, so I can just print my algorithm here so that you are aware what's happening. So algorithm is of course neural networks. Now I want to replace, so how do I call this method? I again write the name of my string variable, then I write dot, and then I write the name of the method, and then in the argument, so all the arguments will be specified by or separated by comma. This is important. Okay, so the first argument is the string to replace. So I want to replace my white space, and what is it I want to replace with? That is hyphen. Okay, so I want to replace my white space with hyphen. Okay, so this will do this. Okay, so it will replace my space with hyphen. Okay, now I want to replace n with l. Okay, so I want to replace n with l. So of course these are the two arguments. You need to specify the string you are replacing and the string with which you are replacing, right? And then they will be separated by comma. So you can run this. So n will be replaced by l. Okay, but because I told you that string has a very important property called immutability, so this will not change my original string. So if you print algorithm here, okay, so you will see that yeah, it does not affect the string at all. Okay, so maybe if I want to induce this change or have this reserved somewhere, so I can store it in another variable called, let's say, algorithm 1. Okay, and this will have and right, I can print that. Okay, so maybe, so let's say print algorithm 1. Okay, so this will be, so in this way you can store your changes, but directly just applying the method in the case of string will not affect the string. Okay, of course it generates the corresponding output which you want, but it does not change the string entirely. Okay, because strings are immutable objects. Okay, so yeah, it's the same thing. So that is what I have just discussed. Okay, then a very important thing which you need to know. So for example, let's say I have a variable whose first name is Narendra and the last name is Modi. Okay, so uh, now I'm creating another variable which I'm calling as full name. Okay, so what I can do, I can write f and then I specify something within single quotes. Okay, so this is what we also call as f string. Okay, so now what I need to what I want to print. So for example, let's say if I write Rahul here. Okay, so left plus right makes, and then in curly braces you specify the variable name which you want to print, right? So you want to print first name here. Okay, and the last name, you can now, there is some space, so let's say I want to just have one space, and then you can provide another variable, and then yeah, so this is the f string. Okay, and we can print a lot of interesting ways, in a lot of interesting ways, right? So let's see how this works. Okay, so what this prints, so this prints everything which is in single quotes. So it prints left plus right makes, and then first name is essentially Rahul, right? And how is this able to put Rahul over here? Because I am providing this in the f string, and in the f string, whatever variable you want to pass, you can pass them in the curly braces. Okay, so let's say if I want to, if I change this to, let's say, right, so this will print, so left plus right makes Narendra Modi, right? So in this way, you can pass any variable if you want to print them. Okay, so this is a pretty important way of printing, and you will be using it a lot. So this is an f string. So uh, just try to experiment with this. Okay, so you'll have the notebook, make a copy of that, and then try to experiment with different sort of f strings. And of course, this will again be part of your assignment. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. Whatever the variable which you want to pass, you specify them in the curly braces. Okay, you specify them in the curly braces. Yeah. All right, so in this way you can print using the f string, right? So this is pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's say if I write data scientist, so I'm writing first name Vikash, middle name nothing, last name Srivastav, right? So I have three, here we had just had two. So what I can write, so f within the f string, so I can write I am none other than, then the first name, the middle name, the last name, and a full stop, and then I am printing something else, which is, let's say I am a data scientist. Okay, so let's see what it prints. So I am none other than Vikas Srivastav, I am a data scientist. Okay, so this is what it's printing. Okay, okay, all right. Now the last concept which you need to be familiar with, so the concept of a, of this word which is in. Okay, so let's say I have a string variable which I'm calling as my string, and I'm storing Albert Einstein in this, right? So this is my string variable. Now let's say what I can do, I'll just run this in another cell, just to demonstrate you, right? So I can print my string. Okay, so this is Albert Einstein. Okay, now I want to see if this particular string is present in my string. Okay, so I write Albert, and then I use a keyword which is called in, and then the my string, the string in which I want to look for. Okay, so if this is present in this string, if this is present in this string, so it will return true, or either it will return false. So Albert is of course present. Let's say if I want to write Alberta, okay, so what do you think this will print? Right, so false. So Alberta is not present, right? Bert might be present, right? So Bert is there, right? Bert is part of this string. So if I look for this particular substring in my bigger string, so if that is present, so it will return true, right? Or else it will return false, right? So what I needed to do, I needed to just specify my string which I want to look for. I use the keyword in, and then I specify the bigger string in which I want to look for. So this in, this particular statement returns a Boolean value. It only returns true or false. Okay, so I hope this thing is clear to you guys. Remember this. And just last thing, so you might have forgotten, so let's see if I want to just repeat this, okay, 10 times. So I can just multiply this by 10. Okay, so bird 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 bird, something like this. Okay, and I can, let's just see if this is present in my string. What do you think? Right, so this will be false because